Hashtag First Contact. The Zephyrian Fleet Commander Vexthal watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The massive human vessel hung in space like a dark monument to destruction. It was unlike anything in their databases, where Zephyrian ships curved and flowed like living things. This human creation was all brutal angles and harsh lines. Gun ports dotted its hull like the eyes of a predator. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with nervousness. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human face. The creature looked remarkably similar to the Zephyrians, but there was something different in its eyes. Something cold and calculating that made Vexthal's skin crawl. "I am Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Warship Retribution," the human said, her voice carrying across the void with crystal clarity. "You have entered human space without authorization. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Vexthal couldn't hide his amusement. The human ship was impressive, certainly, but it was just one vessel against his entire fleet of 300 warships. "Human, I am Fleet Commander Vexthal of the Zephyrian Empire. We claim this system and all its resources in the name of our glorious empire. You will surrender your vessel and submit to our authority." The human's expression didn't change. "You have 10 minutes to begin your withdrawal. This is your only warning." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Vexthal staring at empty space. Around the bridge, his officers exchanged glances of disbelief. The audacity of these creatures was almost admirable. "Sir, should we prepare for battle?" asked his tactical officer. "Yes, but maintain formation. We'll show these humans what happens when they threaten the Zephyrian Empire." Vexthal settled back in his command chair, confident in his overwhelming numerical advantage. 10 minutes passed in tense silence. The human ship hadn't moved, hadn't powered additional weapons, hadn't called for reinforcements. It simply waited, like a patient hunter. "Time's up," Vexthal announced. "All ships advance. Target their engines first. We'll take this vessel intact for study." The Zephyrian fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their elegant ships gliding through space like a school of deadly fish. Vexthal felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. Another easy victory for the Empire. Then the human ship moved. It wasn't the graceful acceleration of Zephyrian vessels. This was pure, raw power. The massive warship surged forward with shocking speed, its hull glowing from the heat of its engines. Within seconds, it had closed half the distance to the Zephyrian formation. "What's their acceleration rate?" Vexthal demanded, leaning forward in his chair. "Impossible, sir. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. It's reading as if they're pulling 15 gravities." Before Vexthal could respond, the human ship opened fire. The first salvo was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the human ship spat solid projectiles at incredible velocities. These weren't ordinary kinetic rounds. Each projectile was the size of a small shuttle and moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The lead Zephyrian cruiser, the graceful wind, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and metal fragments. The kinetic round had struck with such force that the ship's matter had been converted to pure energy. "Evasive maneuvers," Vexthal screamed, but his order came too late. The human ship's gun spoke again and again. Each shot was precisely aimed, each impact catastrophic. The Zephyrian ships, built for speed and elegance rather than heavy armor, crumpled like paper before the human onslaught. "Return fire. All ships, return fire." Vexthal's voice cracked with desperation. The Zephyrian fleet responded, their plasma cannons and particle beams lancing out toward the human vessel. The weapons that had conquered a dozen worlds struck the human ship's shields and simply vanished, absorbed by some impossible defensive technology. "Their shields aren't even flickering," reported the tactical officer, his voice barely a whisper. Captain Chen's face appeared on the display again, her expression unchanged despite the carnage her ship was wreaking. "Commander Vexthal, you were warned. Humanity does not give second chances to those who threaten our people." The human ship accelerated again, impossibly fast, diving into the heart of the Zephyrian formation. Its guns never stopped firing. Each shot was a death sentence. Ships that had taken years to build and decades to crew were obliterated in seconds. Vexthal watched in horror as his proud fleet was systematically destroyed. The humans weren't just winning. They were demonstrating their absolute superiority. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. "Sir, we've lost over half our ships," his tactical officer reported, his voice hollow with shock. "Pull back. All remaining ships, retreat to the outer system." But the human ship wasn't content to let them flee. It pursued with relentless efficiency, its weapons reaching out across vast distances to swat fleeing Zephyrian vessels like insects. "How are they hitting us at this range?" demanded Vexthal. "Their targeting systems, sir. They're more advanced than anything we've seen. They can track and hit a ship from the other side of the solar system." As if to prove the point, another Zephyrian destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash of light, despite being millions of kilometers away from the human warship. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Kretog," the communications officer announced. Vexthal accepted the transmission, and the holographic image of his superior appeared. The Admiral's usual calm composure was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. "Vexthal, what's happening out there? We're detecting massive energy signatures from your position." "Admiral, we've encountered human forces. A single ship has destroyed most of my fleet." "A single ship? That's impossible. You have 300 vessels." "Had, sir. Had 300 vessels." Vexthal gestured at his tactical display, which now showed only scattered dots representing the survivors of his once mighty fleet. "The humans have technology beyond our comprehension. Their weapons, their shields, their engines, everything is impossibly advanced." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Fall back to the Kethmore system. We'll regroup there and plan our next move." "Understood, sir." As the surviving Zephyrian ships limped away from the human vessel, Vexthal couldn't shake the image of Captain Chen's cold, calculating stare. There had been no anger in her eyes, no passion or fury, just the calm efficiency of a predator eliminating a threat. For the first time in his long military career, Vexthal felt fear. Not fear of death, but fear of the unknown. What kind of species could build such weapons? What kind of people could wield such power with such casual efficiency? The Retribution hung motionless in space, surrounded by the debris of the Zephyrian fleet. It made no move to pursue the retreating ships, content to let them spread word of humanity's power throughout the galaxy. Captain Chen stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display as the last of the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace. Around her, the crew went about their duties with quiet efficiency. No one celebrated. This hadn't been a victory. It had been a demonstration. "Ma'am, should we pursue?" asked her first officer. "No, Commander Rodriguez. Let them go. They'll carry our message back to their leaders." "And what message is that, Captain?" Chen's smile was cold as winter space. "That humanity has arrived, and we're not interested in playing by anyone else's rules." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. The Retribution had fired its first shots in what would become known as the Human Expansion War. But, for now, it waited in the darkness between stars, a silent promise of the destruction that would follow for any who dared stand in humanity's path. In the depths of the ship, automated systems were already analyzing the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet, extracting data about their technology and tactics. Every scrap of information would be cataloged and studied, adding to humanity's ever-growing understanding of their potential enemies. The galaxy had been at peace for 1,000 years, with various species maintaining an uneasy balance of power. That peace was about to end, shattered by humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. The Zephyrians had been the first to encounter the newcomers, but they would not be the last. And, unlike the Zephyrians, who had grown complacent in their dominance, humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Every war, every conflict, every hard-won lesson had been absorbed and integrated into their military doctrine. They were not just another species seeking their place among the stars. They were apex predators, and they had come to hunt. Hashtag the Kethmore Massacre. Admiral Kretog paced the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, his clawed hands clasped behind his back. The surviving ships from Vexthal's fleet had arrived at the Kethmore system 6 hours ago, and their reports defy belief. A single human vessel had destroyed over 250 Zephyrian warships in less than 30 minutes. "Show me the recordings again," he commanded his intelligence officer. The holographic display flickered to life, showing grainy footage from one of the few ships that had escaped the slaughter. The human vessel appeared on screen, a massive, angular monstrosity bristling with weapon emplacements. Then came the guns, spitting death at impossible velocities. Kreetog had watched this recording dozens of times, and each viewing left him more disturbed. The human weapons didn't just destroy ships, they annihilated them completely. No debris larger than a fist remained after each impact. "Have the science teams finished their analysis?" he asked. "Yes, Admiral. Their preliminary report is troubling." The intelligence officer's voice carried a tremor of fear. The human projectiles appeared to be accelerated to approximately 12% of light speed. The kinetic energy released upon impact is equivalent to our largest antimatter warheads. "But kinetic weapons are primitive," Kreetog protested. "No civilization uses them beyond their early space age." "That's what we believe, sir. But the humans have somehow perfected them to a degree we thought impossible. They've turned simple physics into the ultimate weapon." A communications alert chimed across the bridge. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command." "Put it through." The holographic image of High Admiral Zethkra appeared before them, her elderly features marked by concern. "Kreetog, I've reviewed the reports from the human encounter. I'm mobilizing the 2nd and 3rd fleets to join you at Kethmore. We cannot allow these humans to threaten our empire. With respect, Admiral, I don't think additional ships will make a difference. Their technology is beyond ours." "That's defeatist thinking, Kreetog. No single ship can stand against the combined might of 3 fleets. You have over 1,000 vessels at your disposal." "The Eternal Dominion had 300, he replied quietly. "It didn't matter." High Admiral Zethkra's expression hardened. "You will hold position at Kethmore and prepare for battle." "That's an order." The transmission ended, leaving Kreetog alone with his doubts. He walked to the observation deck, gazing out at the assembled fleet. Nearly 800 ships floated in perfect formation around the massive Kethmore station. It was an impressive sight, representing centuries of Zephyrian military might. But after seeing what one human ship could do, it felt inadequate. "Admiral," came a voice behind him. He turned to see Fleet Commander Vexthal approaching, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from his escape pod. "Commander, how are you holding up?" Vexthal's expression was haunted. "I've been in combat for 40 years, Admiral. I've seen ships destroyed, crew lost, battles won and lost. But this was different. The humans didn't fight us. They exterminated us." "Tell me about their captain." "This Chun." "Cold, sir. Calculating. She spoke to us like we were insects that had wandered into her home." Vexthal stared out at the fleet. There was no hatred in her voice, no anger. Just disappointment, as if we had failed to live up to some standard. Before Kreetog could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The tactical displays lit up with new contacts appearing at the edge of the system. "Admiral, to the bridge," came the urgent call over the intercom. Kreetog raced back to the command center, Vexthal close behind. The bridge was a hive of activity as officers rushed to their stations. "Report," barked Kreetog. "Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, sir. They're coming out of jump at the system's edge." The main display showed space seemingly tearing open as ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. But these weren't the elegant curves of Zephyrian vessels. These were human ships, dozens of them. "How many?" Kreetog asked, his mouth dry. 73 vessels, and counting, sir. The lead ship it's massive. The human fleet arranged itself in a perfect battle formation, with the largest vessel at its center. This ship dwarfed even the human warship that had destroyed Vexthal's fleet. It was easily 3 times the size of the largest Zephyrian dreadnought. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen, her expression as cold as before. But this time she wasn't alone. Other human faces flanked her, the captains of the other ships, Kreetog realized. "I am Captain Sarachun of the United Earth Navy. You were given the opportunity to withdraw from human space. You chose instead to mass additional forces. This will be your final warning. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Kretog stepped forward. I am Admiral Kretog of the Zephyrian Empire. You are outnumbered more than 10 to 1. Withdraw now, and we will allow you to leave in peace. Chin's expression didn't change. Admiral, you misunderstand the situation. Numerical superiority means nothing when your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses, and our weapons can destroy you from beyond your maximum engagement range. Then, let's test that theory, Kretog replied, his pride overriding his fear. Chin nodded slowly. Very well. You have chosen your fate. The transmission ended, and the human fleet began to advance. All ships, battle formation. Kretu commanded. Target the largest vessel. If we can destroy their flagship, the rest may retreat. The Zephyrian fleet moved into attack position, their plasma cannons charging and missile tubes loading. It was an impressive sight, 800 ships preparing for battle, their hulls gleaming in the light of Keth Mor's twin suns. The humans opened fire first. The effect was immediate and devastating. The lead elements of the Zephyrian fleet simply ceased to exist, vaporized by kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. But this time, the humans weren't just using kinetic weapons. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the human ships, cutting through Zephyrian armor like it was paper. These weren't the relatively weak plasma cannons the Zephyrians used. These were focused streams of pure destruction that could slice a dreadnought in half with a single pulse. Return fire. All ships, return fire, screamed Kretog. The Zephyrian response was massive and coordinated. Thousands of plasma bolts and antimatter missiles streaked toward the human fleet. For a moment, the space between the two forces was filled with death and destruction. Then, the human defensive systems activated. The incoming fire simply vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed, vanished. The plasma bolts winked out of existence as if they had never been fired. The antimatter missiles were somehow neutralized before they could detonate. How? Whispered the tactical officer. How is that possible? The answer came in the form of another devastating human salvo. More Zephyrian ships died, their crews given no time to escape before their vessels were obliterated. Sir, we've lost over 200 ships in the first exchange, reported the tactical officer, his voice shaking. Pull back to the station's defensive perimeter, ordered Kretog. Maybe the orbital defense platforms can. His words were cut off as the massive human flagship fired a single shot at Keth More Station. The projectile struck the station's central hub, and the entire structure, a construction that had taken decades to build, collapsed in on itself like a house of cards. My God, breath Vexthal. They just destroyed our most heavily defended position with one shot. The human fleet continued its advance, their weapons reaching out to claim more Zephyrian lives. The elegant formations that the Zephyrians were so proud of meant nothing against enemies who could kill from impossible distances with perfect accuracy. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from multiple ships, reported the communications officer. Kretog looked at the tactical display. In less than 10 minutes, his fleet of 800 ships had been reduced to fewer than 300. The humans had lost nothing. Their shields hadn't even flickered under the Zephyrian assault. Signal general retreat, he said quietly. Sir, I said signal retreat. All ships withdraw immediately. But the humans weren't content to let them flee. Their ships pursued with methodical efficiency, picking off stragglers and damaged vessels. Each shot was precise, each kill clean and efficient. Captain Chen's face appeared on screen again. Admiral Kretog, your fleet is beaten. Order your ships to stand down, and we'll allow the survivors to return to Zephyrian space with a message. Kretog looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They were defeated, broken. The pride of the Zephyrian military had been shattered in minutes. This is Admiral Kretog to all Zephyrian vessels. Cease fire and prepare to receive the human terms. The surviving ships powered down their weapons, hanging in space like wounded animals. The human fleet surrounded them, their guns still trained on the helpless Zephyrians. Chen spoke again. Your empire will receive the following message. Human space extends 50 light-years in all directions from our colonies. Any Zephyrian vessel found within that boundary will be destroyed without warning. You have 72 hours to evacuate any facilities or personnel from those systems. And if we refuse, Kretog asked, though he already knew the answer. Then, we'll come to you. Chin's smile was cold as stellar void. And Admiral, when we do, we won't offer terms. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrians alone with their defeat. Of the nearly 800 ships that had defended Kethmore, fewer than 150 survived. The magnificent station was gone, reduced to floating debris and twisted metal. As the human fleet withdrew, Kreetog realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted in the span of a few hours. Humanity had announced its presence not with diplomacy or trade, but with overwhelming force. And this was just the beginning. The survivors of the Kethmore massacre would carry word of humanity's power to every corner of the galaxy. Some would call for immediate surrender. Others would demand vengeance. But all would know that a new predator stalked the stars, and it hungered for dominion. The Galactic Council's last stand, the Great Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime, had never seen such chaos. Representatives from across the galaxy shouted and argued, their voices creating a cacophony that echoed off the crystalline walls. At the center of it all stood High Counselor Thexura of the Altarian Republic, her four arms gesturing frantically as she tried to maintain order. "Silence," she roared, her voice amplified by the hall's acoustics. "We face the greatest threat our civilization has ever known, and you bicker like children." The arguing died down, but the tension remained thick in the air. Ambassador Kethval of the Zephyrian Empire stood first, his normally pristine uniform wrinkled and stained. The reports from Kethmore had shaken every military leader in the galaxy. "Honored counselors, we can no longer deny the truth. Humanity possesses technology that makes our combined fleets obsolete. In 2 engagements, they've destroyed nearly 1,000 of our ships while suffering no casualties themselves." 1,000 ships, whispered Ambassador Yilseth of the Crystalline Hegemony, her translucent form shimmering with distress. "How is this possible? Their weapons, their shields, their propulsion systems, everything is centuries ahead of our technology," Kethval continued. "We might as well be fighting them with stone clubs." Representative Gorthay K of the Orcish clans slammed his massive fist on the table. "Then we fight with more ships. Gather every vessel in the galaxy. They cannot stand against the combined might of all our species." "You don't understand," Kethval said, his voice hollow. "Numbers mean nothing to them. Their weapons can reach across entire solar systems. They can accelerate projectiles to speeds that turn simple matter into pure destruction. And their defenses, our most powerful weapons, simply disappear when they hit their shields." The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council represented over 100 species and controlled thousands of star systems. The idea that they could be threatened by a single unknown race was unthinkable. Counselor Thexera activated the central holographic display, showing the current position of human forces. Red markers indicated human-controlled space, a sphere expanding outward from their origin point. Several yellow markers showed systems they had claimed but not yet occupied. "They call it the Human Expansion Zone," she explained. "Any ship entering this area without permission is destroyed immediately. They've given us 72 hours to evacuate our people from 12 systems. And if we refuse," asked Ambassador Veltar of the Aquatic Consortium, "then they come to us." The simple statement sent a chill through the assembled representatives. For 1,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through careful diplomacy and the balance of power between member species. No single race had ever possessed the strength to challenge the entire galaxy. Until now, Ambassador Kethval stepped forward again. "I've spoken with the survivors of both human encounters. They all report the same thing. The humans fight without passion, without anger. It's not conquest to them. It's extermination of obstacles." "Then, what do they want?" demanded Representative Nixera of the Avian Federation. "Space. Resources. Freedom from interference." Kethval's voice was bitter. "They don't seek to rule us. They simply want us gone." High Counselor Thexera looked around the assembly. "The question before us is simple. Do we fight, or do we attempt negotiation?" "Negotiation? Gorta Kroret. These humans have killed thousands of our people. There could be no negotiation with murderers." "They warned us," said a quiet voice from the back of the hall. All eyes turned to see Ambassador Lethini of the Pacifist Coalition, her small, peaceful species rarely speaking in council sessions. Both times, they offered terms before attacking. We chose to fight instead of listening. The hall erupted in angry voices, but Lethini continued. Perhaps if we approach them with genuine offers of peace. Peace. Kethval's laugh was bitter. They don't want peace. They want submission. I've seen their captain's eyes. There's no mercy there, no compassion. Only cold calculation. High Counselor Thexera raised her arms for silence. The vote is simple. Do we mobilize our combined fleets for war against humanity, or do we attempt diplomatic contact? The vote was closer than expected, but the militarists won. Within hours, orders went out across the galaxy. Every species would contribute ships and crews to the largest fleet ever assembled. The target was the human home system, Earth. 3 months later, the combined galactic fleet assembled at the edge of human space. Over 5,000 warships from dozens of species hung in formation, representing the military might of the entire galaxy. Admiral Zethkra of the Zephyrians commanded the fleet, despite her earlier reservations about confronting humanity. All ships report ready. Admiral, came the voice of her tactical officer. Zethkra studied the display, showing human space. Long-range sensors detected massive construction projects around several stars, but no sign of military vessels. The humans seemed to be ignoring the gathering threat. Signal the fleet. We advance on Earth, and may the ancestors forgive us for what we're about to do. The massive fleet began its approach, moving in perfect formation. 5,000 ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering and a symbol of their species' power. Surely nothing could stand against such overwhelming force. They were halfway to Earth when the humans finally responded. Space itself seemed to tear open as human ships emerged from hyperspace. Not dozens this time, or even hundreds. Thousands of vessels materialized around the galactic fleet, appearing from every direction simultaneously. How many? Zethkra asked, her voice barely a whisper. 10,000 contacts and Rising Admiral. They're completely surrounding us. Admiral Zethkra stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had somehow assembled a fleet twice the size of their own, and they'd done it without anyone in the galaxy detecting their movements. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen, but she looked different now. Her uniform bore additional insignia. She'd been promoted. Behind her stood a new figure, an older human male with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes. I'm Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Earth Navy, the man said, his voice carrying absolute authority. You have entered human space with hostile intent. This is your final opportunity to withdraw. Admiral Zethkra found her voice. Admiral Webb, I am Admiral Zethkra of the Combined Galactic Fleet. We come to protect our worlds from human aggression. Withdraw your expansion, and we will consider peace terms. Webb's expression didn't change. Admiral, you misunderstand the situation. There will be no negotiations. Humanity's expansion continues as planned. You may retreat now and live, or remain, and join the debris fields of those who challenged us before. We represent the combined might of over 100 species. Zethkra protested. You cannot stand against the entire galaxy. Admiral Webb smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Zethkra had ever seen. Admiral, you're about to discover that humanity has been preparing for this moment for longer than your species has had spaceflight. We didn't stumble into the galaxy unprepared. We came to conquer it. The transmission ended, and the human fleet began to move. What followed could barely be called a battle. The human ships unleashed weapons that defied comprehension. Beams of energy that could vaporize entire dreadnoughts, kinetic projectiles that traveled faster than thought, and defensive systems that rendered the galactic fleet's weapons completely useless. The humans didn't just win. They demonstrated their absolute superiority. Ship after ship of the combined galactic fleet was destroyed with clinical precision. When vessels tried to flee, they were hunted down and eliminated with ruthless efficiency. In less than 2 hours, the largest military force in galactic history was reduced to scattered debris and a handful of surviving vessels. Of 5,000 ships, fewer than 300 escaped to carry word of the defeat. Admiral Zethkra found herself aboard one of the few surviving vessels. Watching through her view screen, as the human fleet regrouped. They hadn't lost a single ship. Not one. "Admiral," came Captain Chen's voice over the communication system. "You will carry this message to your council. Humanity claims this galaxy. Any species that wishes to survive will submit to human authority. Those that refuse will be eliminated. You can't rule an entire galaxy," Zethkra said, her voice breaking. "It's impossible. Admiral, your species has been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. In that time, you've conquered perhaps 100 systems. Humanity has been in space for less than 3 centuries, and we've already surpassed everything you've achieved." Chen's voice was matter-of-fact, delivering a statement of simple truth. "We don't rule through fear or oppression. We rule through absolute superiority." As the surviving ships limped away from the battlefield, Admiral Zethkra realized that the galaxy had changed forever. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun. Behind them, the human fleet continued toward the heart of galactic civilization, unstoppable as a force of nature. They moved not as conquerors drunk on victory, but as gardeners clearing weeds from a field. To them, the established powers of the galaxy were nothing more than obstacles to be removed. And remove them they would, system by system, world by world, until every star in the galaxy flew under the banner of humanity. The Council's last stand had failed not because they lacked courage or numbers, but because they had faced an enemy that operated on a completely different level of warfare. Humanity hadn't come to play by the galaxy's rules. They had come to replace them. Hashtag the fall of ancient worlds. The ancient world of HFY had stood for over 10,000 years, its massive cities carved from living crystal that sang in harmony with the planet's electromagnetic field. The HFY civilization was among the oldest in the galaxy, their knowledge of quantum mechanics and dimensional physics unmatched by any other species. Their homeworld was protected by defensive systems that had never been breached, shields that could deflect the explosion of a star. Today, those defenses would be tested against humanity. Elder Prime, Yethkala stood in the central sanctuary, her crystalline body resonating with the harmonic frequencies of her world. Around her, the governing council of the Scytherian hegemony had gathered to witness either their salvation or their doom. "The human fleet has entered our outer system," reported Defense Coordinator Thrall9, his voice creating ripples of sound through the crystal chambers. 300 vessels, moving in perfect formation. "And our defenses?" asked Yethkala. "Fully activated, Elder Prime. The planetary shields are at maximum strength, the orbital defense platforms are armed, and our reality anchors are preventing any hyperspace jumps within the system." Yethkala felt a moment of confidence. The Scytherian defenses were legendary. Their shields didn't just block energy, they redirected it into parallel dimensions. Their weapons could tear holes in space-time itself. Any enemy foolish enough to attack their homeworld would find themselves facing the accumulated wisdom of 10 millennia. "Show me the human ships," she commanded. The central display shimmered to life, revealing the approaching human fleet. Unlike previous encounters, these ships were different. Larger, more angular, with weapon systems that seemed to distort space around them. At their head sailed a massive vessel that dwarfed even the mightiest Scytherian dreadnought. "Incoming transmission, Elder Prime." The image of Admiral Marcus Webb appeared before them, his cold blue eyes surveying the Crystal Council chamber with what might have been curiosity. "I am Admiral Webb of the United Earth Navy. You will surrender your world immediately and submit to human authority. Your defenses, while impressive, are inadequate." Elder Prime Yethkala stepped forward, her crystalline form catching and refracting the light of her world. "Admiral Webb, I am Yethkala, Elder Prime of the Scytherian hegemony. We are an ancient people, and our knowledge runs deeper than the void between stars. We will not surrender to upstart children who have barely learned to leave their cradle world." Webb's expression didn't change. "Elder Prime, your species has had 10,000 years to perfect your defenses. We've had 10 minutes to analyze them. That's more time than we need." The transmission ended, and the human fleet began its approach. "All defense platforms, target the lead vessel," commanded Thrall9. "Fire when ready." The orbital platforms around Scytheri opened fire with weapons that had taken millennia to perfect. Quantum disruptors that could unravel matter at the subatomic level. dimensional rifts that opened holes in reality itself. Energy beams that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Every shot struck the human flagship directly. Every weapon hit with perfect accuracy and maximum power. For a moment, the space around the human vessel was filled with exotic energies and fundamental forces unleashed. When the display cleared, the human ship was unchanged. Not damaged, not even marked. It continued its approach as if nothing had happened. Impossible, breathed Thrall 9. Those weapons should have erased that ship from existence itself. Fire again, ordered Yethkala, her harmonic voice carrying a note of uncertainty. All platforms, continuous bombardment. The orbital defenses unleashed everything they had. Weapons that had never failed in 10,000 years poured their fury at the human fleet. Reality warped and twisted around the approaching ships as forces that existed beyond normal spacetime were brought to bear. The humans ignored it all. Their ships moved through the barrage of dimensional weapons like ships sailing through a gentle breeze. Whatever technology protected them was beyond anything the SCK-Therians had ever encountered. Elder Prime, Thrall9's voice was tight with fear. They're targeting our defense platforms. The human ships opened fire for the first time. Beams of coherent energy lanced out, but these weren't the kinetic weapons they'd used against other species. These were different, more sophisticated. Where they struck, the massive orbital platforms simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, they were somehow deleted from reality. "Ow!" whispered one of the council members. "How are they doing this?" Elder Prime Yethkala accessed her people's vast database of scientific knowledge, searching for any explanation for what she was witnessing. The human weapons seemed to operate on principles that were theoretically possible, but practically impossible to implement. They're using controlled singularities, she realized. Micro-black holes contained in some kind of exotic matter field. When they hit a target, they don't destroy it, they consume it. "Can our shield stop them?" asked Thrall 9. "I don't know. We're about to find out." The human fleet had cleared the orbital defenses and was approaching the planet itself. The massive planetary shields activated, creating a barrier of folded space-time around SCK-Theri. It was a defense that could withstand the explosion of a supernova, energy redirected harmlessly into pocket dimensions. The human flagship fired a single shot. The beam struck the planetary shield and, for a moment, held. The ancient SCK-Therian technology struggled against the human weapon, folded space-time warping and twisting as incompatible forces met. Then, with a sound that somehow carried through the vacuum of space, the shield shattered. The crystalline cities of SCK-Theri had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and stellar radiation storms. They had weathered the rise and fall of countless galactic civilizations. Now they began to crack as their harmonic resonance was disrupted by the destruction of the planetary shield. "Elder Prime, we must evacuate the sacred archives," urged one of the council members. "The knowledge of our people cannot be lost." Yethkala looked around the cracking crystal chamber. Her world was dying, its ancient songs silenced by human weapons. "No, if we cannot preserve our world, at least we can preserve our dignity." Admiral Webb's image appeared once more. "Elder Prime, your defenses have failed. Surrender now, and we will allow your people to relocate to a suitable world. Continue to resist, and we will be forced to take more direct action." "What more direct action could there be?" Yethkala asked bitterly. "You've already destroyed our shields, our defenses. What else can you take from us?" Webb's smile was cold as stellar void. "Your world itself." The transmission ended, and the human fleet moved into a new formation. Instead of the typical attack pattern, they arranged themselves around the planet in a perfect sphere. Each ship began to glow with an inner fire, their hulls radiating energy signatures that the SCK-Therian sensors couldn't identify. "What are they doing?" asked Thrall 9, his voice barely a whisper. Elder Prime Yethkala felt her blood turn to ice as she realized what the humans were preparing. They're going to crack the planet. They're going to split SCK-Theri in half. The human ships fired in unison, their weapons striking the planet's surface at carefully calculated points. But these weren't weapons designed to destroy cities or military targets. They were weapons designed to destabilize the planet's core, to turn the world itself into a weapon against its own inhabitants. Deep beneath the surface of SEK-30, tectonic forces that had slumbered for millions of years began to stir. The planet's core, destabilized by the human bombardment, started to shift and buckle. Massive earthquakes shook the world as continental plates ground against each other with impossible force. Elder Prime, the planet is becoming unstable, reported Thrall9, his voice lost in the growing chaos. The humans have somehow triggered massive geological upheaval across the entire world. Through the crystal walls of the central sanctuary, Yethkala could see the ancient cities of her people cracking and falling. Crystalline spires that had stood for 10,000 years tumbled into newly formed chasms. The harmonic songs that had defined Sequitharian culture for millennia were replaced by the groaning of a dying world. Incoming transmission came a voice from the communications array. Admiral Webb appeared once more, his image flickering due to the electromagnetic interference from the planet's destruction. Elder Prime, this is your final opportunity. Order your people to the evacuation sites, and we will transport them to safety. Refuse, and they die with their world. Yethkala looked around at her fellow council members. Some argued for surrender, others for a final stand. But as another massive earthquake shook the chamber and more crystal spires fell, she made her decision. We surrender, she said, her harmonic voice barely audible over the sounds of destruction. We will evacuate our people. Webb nodded curtly. Evacuation transports are standing by. You have 6 hours before the planet's core goes critical. The next few hours were a nightmare of organized chaos as millions of Sequitharians were loaded onto human transport ships. The ancient civilization that had survived for 10 millennia was reduced to refugees in the span of a single day. Elder Prime Yethkala was among the last to leave, standing in the remains of the central sanctuary as her world tore itself apart around her. The harmonic crystals that had sung for 10,000 years lay cracked and silent, their voices forever stilled. Elder Prime, we must go, urged Thrall9, his own crystalline form dimmed with grief. As their transport lifted off from the dying world, Yethkala looked back at Sequithari one last time. The planet was coming apart, massive chunks of its surface breaking away as the destabilized core finally collapsed. In a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from neighboring star systems, the ancient world died. Aboard the human command ship, Admiral Webb watched the destruction with satisfaction. Another ancient civilization had fallen, another potential threat eliminated. The Sequitharians would be relocated to a suitable world, but they would never again pose a challenge to human expansion. Sir, the Nexary Consortium has sent a message, reported his aide. They're requesting immediate negotiations for surrender. Webb smiled. Word was spreading. The destruction of Sequithari, an ancient world protected by legendary defenses, would serve as a message to every other species in the galaxy. Resistance was not just futile, it was suicidal. Tell them to submit their surrender terms through proper channels, he replied. We'll review them when convenient. As the human fleet departed the ruins of the Sequithari system, they left behind only debris and the echoes of a civilization that had endured for 10,000 years. The ancient worlds were falling, one by one, and with each conquest, humanity's grip on the galaxy grew stronger. The age of the ancients was ending. The age of humanity had truly begun. Hashtag the new Galactic Order 5 years had passed since the first human warship entered galactic space. 5 years since the Retribution had announced humanity's arrival with overwhelming force. Now, Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of the Sovereign, humanity's newest and most powerful vessel, gazing out at the transformed galaxy. Below them hung the capital world of New Terra, a massive construct built around a gas giant in the former neutral zone. It wasn't a natural planet, but a series of interconnected space habitats that could house billions. The symbol of humanity's new empire stretched across thousands of kilometers, its cities gleaming with the light of controlled fusion. Admiral, the Council of Governors has assembled for your address, came the voice of his aide, Commander Sarah Chun. She'd been promoted after her exemplary service during the early expansion and now served as Webb's right hand. Webb nodded, straightening his uniform. The time had come to address the representatives of humanity's newest subjects. How many species have submitted? 87 confirmed surrenders, sir. 12 more are in negotiations. Only 3 holdout systems remain, and they're small colony worlds with minimal military assets. And resistance movements? Minimal and decreasing. The destruction of HFY seems to have convinced most species that cooperation is preferable to extinction. Webb smiled grimly. The ancient world's death had indeed served its purpose. When word spread that humanity could crack planets with surgical precision, even the most warlike species had reconsidered their positions. They made their way to the Grand Assembly Hall, a massive chamber that could hold representatives from hundreds of worlds. As they entered, Webb observed the assembled delegates. Zephyrians sat beside crystalline beings. Ancient Essecatharians, the survivors of their world's destruction, shared space with newcomers from species that had voluntarily joined humanity's empire. All of them watched Webb with a mixture of fear and resignation. They had learned the price of defiance. Honored delegates, Webb began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Today marks the 5th anniversary of humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. In that time, we have brought order to a galaxy that had known only chaos and conflict. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to speak. The days of galactic councils and endless debate were over. Under the old system, Webb continued, dozens of species fought constant border wars. Trade was disrupted by pirates and territorial disputes. Entire worlds lived in fear of their neighbors. Today, under human authority, peace reigns from core to rim. Ambassador Kethval of the Zephyrian Protectorate, they were no longer an empire, rose slowly to his feet. Admiral Webb, while we appreciate this stability that human rule has brought, many of our people question whether this peace is worth the cost. Webb's expression didn't change, but every being in the chamber felt the temperature drop. Ambassador, please elaborate on your concerns. Kethval's courage nearly failed him, but he pressed on. The forced relocations, sir. The dismantling of our military fleets. The cultural restrictions. Some feel that we have traded freedom for safety. Freedom is an interesting concept, Ambassador. Webb's voice was conversational, almost friendly. Tell me, how free were your people when the Orcish clans raided your outer colonies? How free were the crystalline hegemony when they lived in constant fear of Zephyrian expansion? The chamber fell silent. Every delegate remembered the old days, the constant threat of war and conquest. Under human rule, every species enjoys protection from external threats. Your people can trade freely across the galaxy. Your children can grow up without fear of invasion. And all we ask in return is acknowledgement of humanity's authority and adherence to our laws. But what of our independence, Pres Kethval? What of our right to govern ourselves? Webb's smile was cold as vacuum. Ambassador, independence is a privilege earned through strength. Your species had that strength once. You chose to use it against humanity. The consequences of that choice are not negotiable. Another delegate rose. Elder Prime Yethkala of the Essecatharian Refugee Council. Her crystalline form was dimmer now, her harmonic voice tinged with sadness. Admiral Webb, my people have accepted their fate. We live now on New Essecathar, and we are grateful for humanity's mercy. But I must ask, what is your ultimate goal? What do you want from us? Webb considered the question carefully. Elder Prime, humanity's goal has always been simple. We want to survive and prosper. But we learned long ago that survival requires security, and security requires control. He gestured to the view screen showing the galaxy beyond. For too long, this galaxy was divided among competing powers, each one a potential threat to the others. We've eliminated that threat by eliminating the competition. So we are to be your subjects forever? Asked Representative Nixera of the Avian Federation, her feathers ruffled with suppressed anger. Not subjects, Webb corrected. Citizens of a galactic empire that will endure for millennia. Your children will know peace. Your worlds will prosper under human protection. And in time, perhaps your species will earn the right to greater autonomy. What would we need to do to earn such rights? Asked another delegate. Webb's expression became thoughtful. Prove your loyalty. Contribute to the empire's growth and security. Show that you can be trusted with responsibility. He paused, looking around the chamber. Some species have already begun this process. The Aquatic Consortium has earned the right to self-governance in domestic matters. The Pacifist Coalition administers humanitarian aid programs across the Empire. A murmur ran through the assembly. This was the first time Webb had suggested that the current situation might not be permanent. But, understand, he continued, his voice hardening, any species that betrays our trust will face the same fate as the worlds that chose to resist. The galaxy will not return to the chaos of the old days. Commander Chun stepped forward. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. The last 3 holdout systems have agreed to surrender terms. Webb nodded with satisfaction. Transmit standard occupation procedures to the local commanders. Full integration within 6 months. He turned back to the assembled delegates. As of today, every inhabitable system in the galaxy acknowledges human authority. The age of expansion is over. The age of consolidation begins. The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. Humanity now controlled an entire galaxy. Millions of star systems, thousands of inhabited worlds, hundreds of spacefaring species. It was an empire unlike anything that had ever existed. What happens now? Asked Kethval, his voice barely a whisper. Now we build, Webb replied. We create infrastructure that will support trillions of beings across millions of worlds. We establish trade routes that will bring prosperity to every corner of the galaxy. We develop technologies that will take us to other galaxies. He walked to the center of the chamber, his presence commanding the attention of every delegate. The old galaxy is dead, killed by its own inability to unite in the face of common challenges. We've given birth to something new, a galactic civilization that will endure for eons. Your species are part of that civilization now, whether as willing partners or reluctant subjects. Elder Prime Yeth Kala spoke again, her harmonic voice carrying across the chamber. And if we choose partnership, what then? Then you help us build something greater than any single species could achieve alone. Imagine it. The knowledge of the Essi-Catharians, the industrial capacity of the Zephyrians, the artistic vision of the Crystallants, all united under human leadership. We could reshape not just this galaxy, but the universe itself. Webb's words painted a vision of unprecedented cooperation and achievement. For a moment, even the most resistant delegates could see the appeal. But make no mistake, Webb concluded, this is not a negotiation. This is an announcement. The human galactic empire exists. You can choose to be productive citizens of that empire, or you can choose to be problems that require solving. But you cannot choose to return to the old ways. The assembly fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in. Humanity had not just conquered the galaxy, they had transformed it. The old order of competing civilizations was gone forever, replaced by a single, overwhelming power. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, many were already beginning to think about how their species could adapt to this new reality. The smart ones would find ways to make themselves useful to their new human overlords. The stubborn ones would learn, eventually, that resistance was truly futile. Admiral Webb remained on the observation deck long after the assembly ended, watching the ships moving through the space around New Terra. Human vessels mixed freely with ships from dozens of other species, all flying under the same flag, all serving the same empire. Sir, Commander Chen said quietly, do you really think they'll accept this new order willingly? Webb considered the question. Some will. Others will resist quietly, hoping for a chance to rebel. A few will never accept human rule and will have to be managed. And their children? Webb smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a genuinely warm expression. Their children will be born into this empire. They'll know no other way of life. To them, human rule won't be occupation. It will simply be the natural order of things. Commander Chen nodded slowly. Then, in a generation or two, there will be no alien species, Webb finished. Only human citizens of different genetic heritage. The galaxy will finally be truly united. As the massive space stations of New Terra rotated slowly beneath them, carrying millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds, Admiral Webb reflected on humanity's achievement. They had taken a galaxy divided by conflict and competition and forged it into a single, unified civilization. It had cost worlds, species, and billions of lives. But the result was peace on a galactic scale, prosperity beyond imagination, and security that would endure for millennia. Humanity had come to the stars not as explorers or diplomats, but as conquerors. And in conquering the galaxy, they had saved it from itself. The age of humanity had begun, and it would last forever.